In the vast and golden corridors of Hastinapura, where royalty strode like gods and the future of kingdoms whispered through the silk drapes of the palace halls, there was a boy who walked in silence, neither completely in the light nor buried in the shadows. He was Yuyutsu, a prince not remembered in the songs, yet one whose decision would echo across the ages. Born on the same auspicious day as Duryodhana, Yuyutsu entered the world with destiny dancing on his breath. But unlike his 99 brothers and his sister Dushala, Yuyutsu was the son of a Vaishya woman, Sukata, a compassionate and wise lady whom Dhritarashtra had taken as a concubine when the royal astrologers foresaw delays in Queen Gandhari's pregnancy. Though his blood was royal, his standing was not. He was not a Kaurava in the way Duryodhana and his siblings were. His name was spoken with a pause, a glance, a whispered reminder of his mother's caste. And yet he trained alongside them. He mastered the sword under Kripacharya's guidance, learned statecraft with Vidura, and absorbed dharma from sages who visited the Kuru court. But even from a young age, Yuyutsu felt the quiet war between justice and ambition stirring within his soul. He watched how Duryodhana walked with the air of a king, even as a child, boastful, proud, and quick to anger. He noticed how Shakuni, their scheming uncle from Gandhara, poisoned the boy's ears with tales of pride and revenge. He observed how Dhritarashtra, their father, loved Duryodhana more than truth itself, blind not only in eyes but in conscience. And Yuyutsu kept quiet. He watched, he listened, he learned. There were few he could confide in. One was Vikarna, another son of Dhritarashtra, wise, thoughtful, and also quietly tormented by the direction their family was heading. The two often sat together under the neem tree in the palace courtyard, away from the grand speeches of Bhishma or the roars of Duryodhana's arrogance. "Brother," Vikarna would say, his eyes cast downward, "can a man born in the house of kings forget what dharma is, simply because no one else remembers?" Yuyutsu would reply softly, "No, brother. But sometimes it takes great courage to remember what everyone else tries to forget." And then came the day when the Kauravas crossed the line no warrior, no prince, no son of Dharma should ever cross. The court was filled with elders, Bhishma, Drona, Kripacharya, and yet they sat silent as Draupadi, wife of the 5 Pandavas, was dragged into the hall like a prisoner. The wicked Dushasana sought to humiliate her, to disrobe her in front of the entire assembly, a crime so dark that the walls themselves seemed to tremble. Vikarna, in a voice that cut through the tension, stood up and protested. "This is not right. This is not Dharma." But he stood alone. Yuyutsu could not bring himself to speak. His voice remained locked in his chest as shame flooded his eyes. That day changed him. From that moment on, Yuyutsu knew that remaining neutral was no longer a choice. Silence was a sin when injustice stood roaring. Something in him hardened, not into hatred, but into resolve. He began to observe more keenly. He moved through the palace as a silent witness to every conspiracy, every venomous whisper. Duryodhana's ambitions grew darker, Karna's fury more relentless, and Shakuni's traps more devious. And when war became inevitable, when the Kurukshetra battlefield was drawn across the dusty plains, when sages and kings and demons and gods stood ready to clash, Yuyutsu stood at a terrible crossroads. He stood not only between two armies, but between loyalty to his blood and allegiance to Dharma. The night before the battle, as the camps echoed with the final songs of peace, Yudhishthira made an offer. "Let those who believe in truth step forward, even if they stand on the side of my enemies. There shall be no shame in choosing what is right." Yuyutsu did not sleep that night. He remembered the lessons of Vidura. He remembered Draupadi's tears. He remembered his own shameful silence. And he remembered that Dharma was not inherited. It was chosen. As dawn broke and the first conches were about to sound, Yuyutsu stepped out of the Kaurava camp. His armor shone not in gold, but in honesty. His steps were slow but sure. The Kauravas stared in disbelief. "Brother!" Duryodhana bellowed. "Where are you going? You shame us!" Yuyutsu looked at him, not with hatred, but with sorrow. "No, Duryodhana, I do not shame you. You have done that yourself. I walk toward righteousness, even if I must leave everything behind." He crossed the field and stood before Yudhishthira. The Pandavas welcomed him, not as a defector, but as a brother who had finally come home. And thus began Yuyutsu's true journey. During the war, he fought not for glory, not for land, but for the soul of Bharat. He rode beside Bhima and warned him of a trap. Duryodhana had poisoned the water supply, hoping to slay him silently. Because of Yuyutsu's courage, Bhima lived, and with him, the might of the Pandava army. On the 7th day of war, Yuyutsu engaged in a fierce battle with Kripacharya. The clash of their swords echoed like thunder over the plain. Though Kripa wounded him, Yuyutsu did not retreat. He fought with dignity until Kripa, recognizing the fire in his heart, withdrew with honor. He faced Shakuni's son Uluka on the 16th day, their fight wild and frenzied. Yuyutsu wounded the deceitful prince, but Uluka, like his father, fled in cowardice. But even as victory came nearer, Yuyutsu's heart grew heavier. He saw Vikarna fall in battle, his only brother who had dared to question evil. Yuyutsu rushed to his side, cradled him as the light faded from Vikarna's eyes. "I'm glad," Vikarna whispered. "You chose the right side." "I should have stood with you in the Sabha," Yuyutsu replied, his voice broken. "Forgive me." The battle ended. The Pandavas stood bloodied but victorious. Of the millions who had assembled at Kurukshetra, only 11 warriors survived. Yuyutsu was one of them. When the ashes settled, when the crows stopped circling above the corpses, and the kingdoms looked to rebuild, Yuyutsu was appointed guardian to Parikshit, the heir of the Pandavas' line. It was a sacred duty, and he fulfilled it with reverence. Later, he became king of Indraprastha, not by conquest but by virtue. He ruled not to dominate, but to protect. Under him, justice returned to the land, but destiny was not yet done with him. Gandhari, grieving mother of the Kauravas, cursed with sorrow and rage, asked to see the Pandavas. Her gaze, it was said, could turn any mortal into ash, for she had spent her life blindfolded, and her penance had granted her eyes of divine fire. Krishna, ever wise, suspected her intent. He turned to Yuyutsu, her only surviving son, and said, "You must remove her blindfold. But know this, Yuyutsu, when one carries fire in their heart, even truth cannot protect you from its flame." Yuyutsu approached his stepmother. "Mother," he said softly, "let your eyes be free." She opened them. A storm of fire swept the space between them, and in an instant, Yuyutsu, the last surviving Kaurava, the righteous prince, the silent protector, was reduced to ash by the very mother who had lost every other son to war. Her scream tore through the heavens. You were the only one who walked the path of light." But it was too late. Krishna stepped forward, and with sorrow in his eyes, he said, "You have slain your only hope." The one child who rose above his birth and chose the way of Dharma. The fire in Gandhari's eyes faded. She collapsed, blind once more, not by cloth, but by regret. Yuyutsu's name did not ring through the halls of fame. Poets rarely sang of him. Temples were not built in his honor, but sometimes in the quiet moments when the wind whispers through the ruins of Kurukshetra, or when a man chooses truth over comfort, his spirit rises again. For Yuyutsu was more than a warrior. He was proof that even when born into darkness, one can still choose the light.